There we go. Good morning, everybody. Hello, welcome. My name is Elise Ryan, and I am the mayor of the city of Chanhassen. So I'd like to personally welcome all of you to our beautiful city. Thank you. I'd also like to thank Chanhassen High School, Go Storm, for allowing us to be in this great space. And of course, thank you all for being here on this Saturday morning to participate in this roundtable in Town Hall. It's certainly my pleasure and honor to have the opportunity to introduce Congressman Dean Phillips. As many of you know, he is a proud father, a Gold Star son, a successful businessman, dedicated civic leader, and of course was elected last year as representative for Minnesota's 3rd Congressional District. He's coming up on almost a year under his belt, so congratulations. In Congress, Representative Phillips is a member of the House Ethics, Financial Services, and Foreign Affairs Committees, as well as a member of the Democracy Reform Task Force and the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. While these are his official duties in Washington, D.C., the congressman has worked hard to stay connected to the people that he serves in the 3rd District. I would like to share some statistics with you. He has hosted 9 public town hall meetings, and community conversations, including today. He has convened over 20 roundtables and listening sessions, bringing together mayors, superintendents, police and fire chiefs, and other community leaders around the district in diving into issues on everything from aquatic invasive species and water infrastructure to sex trafficking, immigration policy, and of course the opioid epidemic. In addition, Dean has had well over 100 meetings with individuals and organizations, as well as visits to businesses of all sizes throughout the district. He wants to listen to the people in his district so he can take what he learns from all of you and bring it to action in D.C. He is ready to listen to you today, which means now, so please join me in welcoming Congressman Dean Phillips.
Good morning, everybody. I want to start by saying thank you. To get up on a Saturday morning and come out together in a school auditorium and talk and convene with one another, neighbors and me, is what makes me optimistic, strangely enough. And this is exactly what we've got to do more of. This is why I ran for Congress, is to get people together. So no matter your political views, I welcome you and all, and encourage every one of you to the extent that you can, in any way you can, big or small, get people together, because that, I would argue, is the answer to our greatest challenges. So welcome, everybody. And I want to start by thanking some people. My extraordinary staff. Rest assured, I couldn't do anything that I'm trying to do without an extraordinary staff that works so hard, tirelessly, 7 days a week. And I'm grateful to all of my staff. We're going to stay around. I've got to leave for a parade here right at the end of the town hall. And my staff is going to stick around, so if any of you want to continue conversations or share perspectives, ideas, opinions, criticisms, they'll be around to do so. Representative Steve Elkins, I see in the audience. Welcome, Steve. Representative Kelly Morrison is in the audience. Let's see. Oh, my mother, Dee Dee Phillips, is in the audience. My mom is the one that raised me to not just be an observer, but to be a participant, which is why I stand on the stage in front of you today. And I'm so honored. I want to start by letting you know something that's going to surprise you all, and that is I love my job. How about that? I love my job. I have never loved a job more than this one, because few know this, but what we really do every single day is just try to help people, one person at a time. You know, that's not what's portrayed on national nightly news and on Twitter, but our real job is helping people. People that have challenges that would shock and dismay most of you in this room, and it is what I take such pride in doing every single day, so thank you for that opportunity. I love what I do. I also want to start by sharing a couple of epiphanies that I've discovered in Congress so far. And then, because I believe representation begins with listening, I want to turn it over to you for anything that might be on your mind. And we'll have 2 microphones circulating around from our staff, and just raise your hand and they will find you. My first epiphany. Strangely enough, there's a lot more collegiality in Congress between members on both sides of the aisle than you would ever possibly imagine. I never thought it possible. And I say that not because we're all is said and done and we're on the right path. We've got a lot of work to do. But the good news is, it's a very human place. Whether you like some of the people you see in Congress or you don't, no matter its reputation, at the end of the day, it's 535 people, just like all of us in this room. Different perspectives, different life experiences, different backgrounds, different degrees of respect, but human beings nonetheless. And I've been really pleased so far. You got to be intentional, but I've been pleased at the human relationships that are possible in Congress. And I think with 92 new members from all around the country in this new class, that we're bringing a new ethos to a place that truly needs it. On the flip side, I've never in my entire life been exposed to an organizational structure that is so woefully designed to accomplish its mission as Congress. A place surely designed to make change very difficult, and it works really well. And I say this, I'm going to walk you through what I've discovered. Mind you, I've only been at this for 8 months, and I've kept my eyes and ears wide open and been as objective as humanly possible over those 8 months. The first day we were in Congress, 92 new members come to Washington for the orientation program, which would be much better called a disorientation program, because I think it's systematically designed to do just that. Instead of getting us together, doing a ropes course or something, like I always say, to get us to build trust, to get us to share our life experiences, get us to get to know each other and break bread, it is just the opposite. Oftentimes in the very beginning we were put on separate buses going to separate events. There was no intention that I could see about getting us together and recognizing our duty was to the country, not to the party that you represent. And it was a missed opportunity because almost 20% of the entire House of Representatives was new in this freshman class. But all is not lost because it's not too late, and a lot of us feel exactly the same way. But the orientation process, which is what I call the social design of Congress, it is, again, designed to separate, not collaborate. That's one. Second, the physical design of Congress. How many of you have been to Washington, D.C. and just walked through a congressional office building? Which is quite a remarkable. I'm so thrilled to see so many of you. You will know what I mean when I say the physical design of Congress is horrific, considering what we are there to do. It is not designed to inspire outcomes. There's barely any fresh light. There's very few public spaces. It's almost impossible to get a meeting room. Our offices are cramped. We're working in 19th century environments to solve 21st century problems. And I put a lot of stock in physical design generating good outcomes, whether they be in schools or whether it be in Congress. Designed again to keep us separate and instead of collaborative. Third, the organizational design of Congress. If you watch a United States Congress hearing, you will know what I'm talking about. 50 or so people sitting with their backs towards each other, dwelling in 5-minute sound bites. I'm in 8 months now in Congress. I've yet to sit at a table with my fellow members in my 2 major committees to talk about policy, because that's not part of how it works. We have hearings, we don't have meetings. And everyone is so darn invested in the relentless pursuit of money for their campaigns that any free moment one has in Washington, D.C., they're going to get a PAC check or they're meeting with lobbyists and they're not doing the work. We have a comprehensive failure of our organizational design, and I would say it starts in the leadership offices. Because if we have the right people in the right positions at the right time with the right mandate to do better, we could fix it in a heartbeat. Because every rules package that we vote on in the new Congress can comprehensively change how we do things in Congress. And I think it's time we start looking to that. And I say that because I think in the beginning of a new Congress, the leaders of each party should sit down at a table, identify the issues important to the country first, identify where the intersections are between the 2 parties, and create a strategy and roadmap to get there and share it with members of Congress. Many of you in this room have worked in some organization, institution, for-profit, non-profit, and I think it's fair to say you cannot be successful if you don't have a mission that is articulated and a roadmap to get there. And if that doesn't start in the U.S. Congress, it is so simple, it is so foundational, and if it doesn't start in the United States Congress, where in the heck will it start? So, I'm focused. We're going to talk about a lot of issues today. Every one of them that you bring up, mind you, is going to be important, because if it's important to anybody in my district, it's something worth listening to. With that said, I'm investing a lot of my time in process, because I've come to the decision very quickly that it doesn't matter what is most important to any of you, or to all of us. It's going to be really hard to affect it in a reasonable way, in an expeditious way, if we don't change the process. Process is not political. And I will tell you, in private conversations with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, we all acknowledge the truth. We just need people inspired with the courage to do something about it, and I will not rest until we do. So I want to make that commitment to you. That's what I'm focused on. So with that, I want to hear from you. I have one request, just respectfully. I'm here to listen. I will answer thoughtfully. I will listen to your questions. There's a lot of passion on a lot of subjects, as there should be in this country right now. And mind you, I pay attention to it every day. I wake up thinking about it. I go to sleep thinking about it. And that is my only request. I welcome you all. I'm grateful you're here. I ask you to do one thing. Keep the faith. I'll remind you of that at the end of the day, too. There's a lot in this country to be optimistic about. It starts with you, the fact that you came out here today. This is a beginning. This district, the 3rd District in Minnesota, had the highest turnout in the entire United States of America. So let's use this as a way forward. Let's show the rest of the country what thoughtful, engaging dialogue looks like, and let's show the rest of the country that you can disagree without being disagreeable. I love you all. I'm ready to hear your questions, and I think let's get to it. All right, so who's got the microphones? Okay, 2 in the back with Grant and Caitlin. Caitlin, do you want to? I'll let Caitlin hand out the microphone. That way I can be totally independent. A very happy place. Welcome.
Good morning, Dean. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Nice to see you at the State Fair.
I was. Thank you for the sandwich recommendation. It was fabulous. So we agree there. We agree on gizmos. So, Congressman Phillips, on numerous occasions you've described yourself as fiscally responsible. On your campaign website, fiscal responsibility is listed as one of your top priorities, accompanied by a 3-step action plan that you would advocate for if elected. In the June 2019 Town Hall, I asked you the question on fiscal responsibility. You stated this issue is all about strategy and leadership, that strategies need to be implemented over time to better manage it. You mentioned that you wanted to initiate a bipartisan commission that studies the debt and deficit, making nonpartisan recommendations. However, your voting record tells a different story, Congressman Phillips. On July 25, 2019, you voted for H.R. 3877, a budget bill that will increase the deficit over $1 trillion in 2020. Your colleague, Colin Peterson, in CD7, voted against this bill because he felt it went against his fiscal responsibility beliefs. Granted, his math was off. You're correct, Congressman Phillips. Fiscal responsibility is a leadership issue. At the June Town Hall, you said there's no political incentive for being fiscally responsible. You're absolutely spot on with this assessment. It further elucidates your point that fiscal responsibility is a leadership issue. But being a leader means sometimes you need to do something that's not popular because it's the right thing to do for the people you are leading. Growing up, my father always asked me, Brittany, are you going to be a leader or are you going to be a follower in life? So my question to you, Representative Phillips, are you going to be a fiscally responsible leader? Start the dialogue about what strategies actually need to be implemented and vote in a manner that demonstrates this fiscal responsibility to your constituents. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Okay, so the answer is yes. I do intend to be a fiscally responsible member of Congress. I'm disgusted that neither party right now is recognizing the fiscal challenges that we are facing. Let me address a couple things. That bill, perfect example of what I'm talking about process, okay? The 115th Congress, the one before the one I was sworn into, passed a tax reform bill in 2017 that exploded our deficit to the tune of over $1 trillion. The bill we just voted on, that budget bill you just discussed, was something handed to us. I was not a participant in its formation. We had 2 options. Either vote for it and continue this path that I agree is completely inappropriate for our fiscal future, or default on our debt. Something our country has not done, something that I will never allow us to do. Because if you can't believe in the United States' ability to pay back its debt, all is lost. Those are the issues facing it. A lot of people took a political vote on this thing. There's no question. A lot of people on both sides of the aisle. Everybody who voted against that bill essentially was saying, I'm willing to default on the United States federal debt. Okay? The next, I will tell you, the vote right after that one was a proposition by Thomas Massey, very conservative member of Congress. And his proposition was to rename that budget bill the Kick the Can Down the Road to Our Children Act. I voted for that. Because that was my way of saying I will not be a member of Congress who allows our country to default on its debt, but I will be a member of Congress that's going to plant the flag moving forward where now I can try to do something about it. And yes, we should form a commission that has teeth, that investigates not just how to thoughtfully budget, but also investigates every single federal program and agency to identify what works, what doesn't, what's efficient, and what's not. That's not political. And if we start making this a political issue again, shame on us. So the answer is yes. Remember, I've been on 8 months, got a lot of work to do, and I promise you, fiscal responsibility is something I will elevate, and it is something we have got to all be mindful of. We now have over a $1 trillion deficit. We have almost a $23 trillion national debt, and we are now spending $400 billion a year on our debt service, on the interest on our federal debt. That's $400 billion that we cannot spend investing in children, investing in healthcare, defending our nation, you name it. And that number is going to keep going up and up and up. And I remember as a little boy hearing in the news, even during the Reagan years, about how fiscal irresponsibility is going to be handed to our children. Well, now I'm one of those children. And you all have children and grandchildren that they will be handed the same thing. And we are on a very dangerous path because when we won't make the decision when it's too late. When the international investment community decides the United States of America is no longer the safest place to deploy capital, it is too late. And that is not our choice. So yes, it's a big deal. I'm explaining my vote very factually. And I promise you, it is going to be something I elevate. I'm a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus. It is the only venue in the entire United States Congress where we sit down once a week and talk policy in a bipartisan way. It's what the whole damn Congress is. And I promise we will, and I will also let you know, just this week I joined, I think, 7 or 8 or 9 colleagues in sending a letter to leadership reminding them that pay-go, meaning that if we're going to institute new programs in this country, we have got to identify ways to pay for them. That letter is public, and I'm going to do my best. And I ask all of you, whether you're Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Independents, to encourage your representatives and every representative in this country to look at our programs relative to efficiency, effectiveness, and value. And if we did so, we'd be a much better country, and that's my promise.
Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning.
My name is Karen Lumpus. I'm from Bloomington. And before I ask you my question, first I want to thank you for support for a bill that I met with one of your staff members about earlier this year. I met with Emma Youngquist. I'm an advocate and a volunteer for the Animal Humane Society of the United States. And we met about various issues, and I know you signed on to and voted for a bill, the Soaring Act, that was for protecting Tennessee walking horses. And I thank you for that. That was very nice to know and important for me as an animal volunteer and advocate. My question, however, regards impeachment of President Trump. I sent to your office via Emma and also just regular mail earlier this week a letter listing all of the reasons why I believe it's time for you to come forward and publicly support the impeachment of this president. And it's ongoing. There's everyone knows all of the reasons, but especially these last 2 weeks, last few weeks, there's just been this avalanche, in particular of the corruption that has come out, the continued abuse of powers, of angling pardons, the story that came out last night where the National Air Guard was diverted to his resort in his golf course in Scotland, just ongoing. If not now, when? And I'm so concerned with the precedent. So that's my question. Why not? Why not? Please come forward and support the impeachment of President Trump.
Thank you. I'll answer the question in detail. I also want to just remind all of you, perfect example of, you can make an appointment with my staff on anything that's important to you. Let them know what it is, and I rest assured I will look at anything that's important to any of you. If there's a bill that exists, I will consider supporting it. If something doesn't exist, we will write it, and we've done that a number of times, and I'm grateful you took the time to do so. On impeachment, I'm surprised it took so long to come to the question. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Okay? Yeah. I watched the 2016 election probably with the same eyes that most of you in this room did, and I could barely sleep that night. You know, it was a moment that I will never forget in my entire life, no matter how well we do in the future, and I am optimistic. But that moment is something I will never forget. I barely slept, watched with my family. I woke up in the morning and I promised my daughters at the breakfast table that I would do something about it. Because I saw them cry about a presidential election in the United States of America. And as affected as I was, seeing them and their reaction was all I needed to remind myself that it was time to stand up and do something and set everything else aside. So I remind you that I ran for Congress in no small part because of this man. And I promised you during my campaign that we would conduct a campaign antithetical to the way he conducted his campaign and himself. It would be invitational, not confrontational. It would value everybody's perspectives, and most of all, would be respectful to all. And that's how we ran the campaign, and we succeeded. And I promised you during the campaign that change is coming. And the change I was referring to is the fact that I stood up to run for Congress because I was living in a district represented by a man who didn't seem to care about holding town halls, who didn't care to seem about courage, who didn't seem to care about principle over party. And it troubled me. And I thought, if I could flip this seat and we could have a House of Representatives that at least provided a check and balance on this administration, that would be a small step in the right direction, and we did it. So we have a House now, at least that is providing checks and balances and oversight, because I rest assured there would be no investigation right now if we didn't flip the House. So I refer to the fact that we did accomplish that first step. And I didn't declare my run for Congress until, I think it was April of 2017. I was actually hopeful that this president might take a different tone after he was inaugurated. But the day of his inauguration, he started lying. That's why I declared my candidacy. I thought I had to do something about it, and we have. So now we turn up the clock. I feel probably like most of you in this room. I just cannot believe that this man represents the United States of America. It seems antithetical to my values and principles. It frankly seems antithetical to the values and principles of most Republicans I know. And I'm deeply troubled, and frankly, I'm horrified. And every single passing day when I see him continually be disrespectful and dismaying and mean-spirited and lie, outright lies to the American public, I recognize and feel the same anxiety, angst, and anger that all of you feel. So then I look to history and I look prospectively to the future as to what we can do. And I got to tell you, something that I've come to recognize in very cold, stark terms are the constitutional limitations that we have in times like these. As beautiful as our Constitution is, yes, Congress, yes, the House of Representatives has the power to initiate impeachment proceedings. That is true. And I'll make this really clear to all of you. From the very beginning of my campaign to this very moment right now, I've talked about process. And I believe that what we are doing right now is exactly the principled and appropriate path and the appropriate process to identify everything that we can and investigate everything that appears needs investigation to make a case. And I did not run for Congress to impeach the president. I did run for Congress to hold him and his administration accountable. That we're doing. Relative to impeachment itself, I favor the investigation. Some of you might have read that Jerry Nadler now just announced yesterday, I think, plans this Wednesday to take a vote because of things you just mentioned. Why did military flights going to Kuwait stop and spend time at his resort in Turnberry? Why? How can we turn a blind eye to the emoluments clause in the Constitution? My Republican friends believe in the Constitution just as much as I do. It is clear, it is in writing, it is black and white. And it is horrifying to me that we might even consider normalizing this behavior. But no prosecutor, will ever indict somebody until the investigation is complete. I just want to make my position clear. I am in favor of anything else process, and we have a process in place right now. In the Judiciary Committee, they are entrusted with the investigations, and they would be entrusted with identifying the specific articles of impeachment if that were to happen. I do not serve on that committee. I will have trust them to go through their process. I trust Chairman Nadler. I trust the members of that committee to complete their investigation, present what they discover to the entire United States Congress, and rest assured I will make a very principled decision based on what they present. So I want to make it clear. This is not a question of do I favor impeachment or do I not favor impeachment. This is, I am appalled by this president, and if we do not apply a thoughtful process and set that precedent and normalize process in this country, shame on us. And I am fearful, I'm very fearful about the decisions, not the decisions we make, but I'm fearful that if we don't make those decisions based on a regular order process, the future is going to be awfully dark for future presidents in both parties. So that's why I'm focused on that. And I just want to make it clear to all of you who are spending your time sometimes on the streets and in my office and sending me messages, sometimes friendly, sometimes not. I hear you and I understand. And frankly, if I wasn't standing up here and I was sitting down there, I'd probably be doing the same thing. I've learned a lot in 8 months. And I'm telling you, I think we've got to stay with the path we're taking right now. It is the right path. And at the end of the day, for those of you who want to see this president removed from office, one thing is for certain. One thing is for certain. If people get out and vote in 2020, which is only 14 months from now, it will happen. And 150 million Americans will be that judge and jury instead of 100 members of the Senate, most of whom right now, unfortunately, are favoring party over principle. So let's seize that power back and turn our attention to doing the one thing that every single one of us can do, including myself, which is show our kids and our grandkids that we did the right thing, collectively, in November of 2020. That's how I feel. I respect you, everybody on this subject. And I want you to know where I stand, and I will continue to favor this investigation wholeheartedly, because it is our responsibility and our obligation. We got to move to the back at some point. Okay.
I'm Richard Lakeland from Bloomington. Hi, Mr. Congressman. Again, I want to appreciate your conducting these town hall forums. I think they're very important. It's a breath of fresh air from recent years.
Also, a low bar.
I wish to address the climate crisis. I think this is perhaps the most important issue that has to be dealt with quickly and boldly. Briefly, I want to comment on the impeachment process. The issue in regard to the president that hasn't been dealt with is what mental health care professionals. He is suffering from a narcissistic personality disorder, and that has to be dealt with and discussed and dealt with in regard to the Constitution. But let me get to the climate crisis. We need to support these young people who have stepped up, including Greta Thunberg from Sweden, who stepped up and started opposing the climate and in favor of climate crisis with the Swedish Parliament, and came over here, took 2 weeks to come over here, and is now participating in this. I want to, in the process, thank you for co-sponsoring HR 1146 in regard to restoring the protection of the Arctic refuge. And I want to strongly encourage you to co-sponsor the climate emergency resolution. I guess it's a Green New Deal. We need to have you to co-sponsor this. It's an important element. And I will not go into details regarding this. I will mention, though, for the benefit of everybody, you know about the global climate strike that is taking place on the 20th of this month. And we need to address this and be active in participating in this, supporting the young people that are involved in this, supporting the policies and the interests of indigenous peoples throughout the country and the world. This There are two sites for this participation in the global strike. And one is at Minneapolis City Hall at 8 a.m. It's a little early. On the 20th, Friday the 20th. The other is at 11:30 in St. Paul. It's a couple of blocks west of the Capitol. So hopefully you and family members and friends and neighbors could participate in this. And finally, I want to quote Chief Seattle wrote to a president over 150 years ago. What befalls the earth befalls all the children of the earth. This we know, the earth does not belong to man, man belongs to the earth. All things are connected like the blood that unites us all. Man did not weave the web of life. He is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. Thank you.
Climate change. Goes back to what I said moments ago. If we really want to change the future of not just this country, but the entire world, we have to replace this president in 2020. And I do believe that any of the Democratic nominees right now who ultimately might become president, or even people who may not be on the radar screen, I almost can guarantee you that the issue about what we're speaking right now will become very primary, as it should. The ignorance right now, the lack of attention, the lack of effort, the lack of action is appalling. And I listen to kids on this subject as much as I do adults. And when children, when high schoolers and middle schoolers come to Washington and I meet with them, when I go to their schools in our district, I ask them, what's most important to you? Two things, constantly two things, climate change and gun violence prevention. Those are the two issues that I will tell you, though my obligation is to serve you, the voters, my equal obligation is to serve the children who do not have the chance to vote yet. So I would do a few things. Change how we talk about this is not just climate change, but habitat change. It's affecting our habitats. Talk to any farmers whose planting seasons are changed. Talk to people in Miami, Florida, where they're raising the streets because of flooding. Talk to people all around the world who are facing drought. It's coming. And it's obvious, and it's real, and it's science, and we can't deny it. And if we don't start talking about it as such, we're in trouble. Secondly, this is not about the survival of the planet. I think the Earth will survive. The question is, will we? So let's talk about it in human terms, which is how we should talk about every policy that faces us, whether it's violence, whether it's healthcare, or in this case, whether it's climate change. Climate change is too big for people to comprehend. It's too big for any of us in this room to comprehend. But the survival of humankind is not. And if we turned it into that, I think you would find leadership on both sides of the aisle changing their perspective, addressing it in a way that hasn't been done before. And I think it starts with that. If I were sitting in the White House, I would make this a priority. I would establish probably a cabinet level position on this subject. I would, if in Congress, I would ensure that there's a task force that actually has teeth, that has bipartisan inspiration and respect, and would act on the results. That's why I've sponsored the Carbon Fee and Dividend Act, which finally puts a price on carbon and at least creates an incentive and disincentive for people to start paying their behavior. And returns all that money to taxpayers. Returns the money to taxpayers. We can change how people act if we provide incentives and disincentives. Government mandates don't always work, incentives usually do. And we shouldn't just be talking about it, we should be implementing it. We shouldn't just be, well, we should be not just at the table internationally, we should be leading the table. But this president does just the opposite. Not only does he not acknowledge it, he demeans it, he makes fun of those who actually believe in science. And it all starts at the top. And I'm not just disappointed, I'm frightened by that. Lack of attention is something that is existential. We spend $700 billion a year on defending the United States of America from a military perspective. Why are we not spending something on defending us against the most clear existential threat, which is that facing us relative to changing climate? And furthermore, it goes without saying, I think future wars are going to be fought because of it. And I don't think we're prepared for it, whether it's for water or food. When Duluth, Minnesota is named as a climate refuge, you know something is going on. And I mean this really seriously. Here's the good news, and here's why I'm optimistic. Young people are mobilizing. This is not something that can be ignored moving forward. This, I hope, is the very last president and administration in United States history that doesn't take this seriously. And I hope both parties are one of the foundations of conservatism is conservation. If Teddy Roosevelt were alive right now, he'd be at the forefront of this issue. I say shame on both parties for a long, long time. This is something for 40 years has been part of the conversation. So it's time for change, and it goes back to what I'm going to keep going back to, process. We need to improve the process. We need to, instead of the time of relentlessly pursuing money for campaigns, let's spend time talking about issues, talking with people, identifying solutions, identifying best practices around the world, and most importantly, using our allies that used to be our friends to identify thoughtful solutions, because this is no longer domestic policy, this is international policy, and we need the world to come together on this subject, because it will not matter for them. That's what we have. And as for the Green New Deal, the Green New Deal is a prospectus. It's not a plan. It's not something to execute. It has elevated the conversation, and that I respect. But I'm focused on actionable solutions, and we have got to go to a process that can identify what those are. And it is not one thing that we can do. It is not one lever we can pull, whether it's gun violence prevention or climate change. We've got to do it comprehensively. We've got to dedicate the resources, the energy, and the time to doing so. And rest assured, I think beginning in 2020 in November, because I don't think much is going to happen, to be forthright, between now and 2020. But we can start mobilizing and preparing, so when that day comes, we got a process in place to tackle this and get the world together to do so collectively, and that's where my focus will be. Then I want to go up to the second, after this question, I want to get up to the second tier.
Okay, everybody hear me? No.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Gene Moore, and I'm from Minnetonka.
Hi, Gene.
I'm concerned about something that you talked about just a moment ago, gun violence. I'm concerned about that very little has been done comprehensively. I hear that word, I heard you use it, but it hasn't been done in anything I've heard submitted. Well, here's a thought. The EPA values a life at $9.1 million. That's what they do. I looked it up. In the El Paso and Dayton, Ohio, there were 37 people killed. That's a total of $333.37 million. That's a lot of money. A lot of lives, a lot of money. This is a serious issue. You said you're a member of the task force. I've written a proposal for gun legislation, which is comprehensive. I promise you it's that. And I promise you it doesn't take much to read. There's only 10 pages. I gave a copy of it to your staff to get to you. I'm telling you now that you have my permission to make 535 additional copies of that. And I promise you that it resolves a lot of the issues that people have talked about for a long time. Concern. The concern that people have, diametrically opposed issues that keep sensible gun control from being passed are the Constitution says you cannot take away my gun. And the second question is, how do we keep guns out of the hands of people who should not own them? The proposal I've written addresses that. I ask you, since you're on the task force, to give that copy to each of those members, debate it. I promise you that the answers are somewhere tied up in that, and if you can make that happen, you will take away one huge concern that all of us have, and that has not been addressed today, and it connects the dots.
I make a promise to you. I will read it, and I will share it with Mike Thompson, who leads the task force. We get back to Washington this Monday, and I will share it with him. And I use this as a metaphor for what I hope we all start doing, which is sharing your ideas on any policy issues we might have, because Congress is so devoid of process that we do not hear enough good ideas to be forthright. And I don't think the good ideas that we're going to act on are going to be developed inside. They've got to come from all of us. So thank you.
Follow-up thing.
Yep.
And that is, I have sent this copy to Charles, operating as a member of the Congress and Senate. I went to his staff, I met with his staff, and talked to him about it.
Okay.
He agreed with me, and I said, please, whatever you do, imagine this was an outrageous. I said, do not put this in your desk and pull it out after the next mass shooting. I never heard another word about it, and I haven't heard any of those ideas expressed. And when you read those, I promise you, the answers that you're going to be able to take, you're going to be able to stand up and it's good. You're the one who presented it to Congress.
Thank you. And I'm grateful. So let me address this subject. You know, I'm a father of 2 daughters. I never in my life imagined, when I was growing up, we did drills to run under our desks thinking that we might be bombed by the Russians. And that scared me. You know, and any of you might remember the movie The Day After. That's what, I remember the trauma that caused me, thinking about that at any moment, something would fall out of the sky and life would end as we know it. And I still think about that. And now I visit schools, just like this one. I've been to this school. I've listened to kids and teachers and administrators talk about fear. I've seen kids who show me their backpacks that have, like, armor in it. I have kids tell me about the drills they have to do in school now. I have kids and teachers telling me about the fear they have when they walk into schools, and frankly, I'm one of them. I have a strange sense of fear now when I walk into schools in a way that I never imagined I'd have ever, because it's become part of our national challenge. And I say school specifically because we're in one, and it goes back to kids. And the fact of the matter is, young people are often now the perpetrators and the victims of this gun violence. So, what do we do about it? Well, first and foremost, again, Congress. No process, and it's totally beholden to special interests. But I'm going to talk about a couple things that have happened this year. Starting with the NRA. They've had a chokehold. They've had a chokehold, not just on the Congress itself, but on members of Congress themselves, for years, economic and otherwise. And that is, for the first time in a generation, eroding fast. This is an NRA that used to represent gun owners and Americans and thoughtful policy, an NRA that once advocated for safe measures to protect people in this country, an NRA that taught me, as a young kid at camp, how to shoot a rifle, and how to clean it, and how to be safe with it. That's not the NRA of today. And I'm not going to hold NRA members accountable, but I sure as heck I'm going to hold the leadership of the NRA accountable, because they've done a terrible disservice to this country. And they could have been part of the solution, and I think that's too late. The other thing that happened this week is Walmart, of all organizations, Walmart finally announced, regardless of whether you think they're part of the problem, they want to be part of the solution. And lo and behold, other corporations finally had the courage to start making some announcements this week. So let me tell you, everybody in this room who's been doing anything, Gene, you with your plan, mothers demand action, kids demand action, you're making a difference, because it is changing. And this is how this country works. When people care, they mobilize, they protest, thoughtfully, respectfully, and that's how change comes. And it is slow, and it is hard, and it's excruciating sometimes, and boy, do I wish it happened faster. But it is going to happen. And we're going to go back to Washington to a very different Congress, I think, this week. A very different one. I will tell you, though, why has nothing happened? We got a guy named Mitch McConnell sitting in the Senate, who, regardless of your party, regardless of your politics, liberal, conservative, anything in between, the fact that he won't take bills that we passed in the House and even put them on the floor of the Senate is a total dereliction of duty. And goes back to what I've been saying and will keep saying, process. If you can't entrust the Congress to at least debate these laws, my goodness, what do you expect? You can't expect anything of anybody. And I don't also think we passed 2 important bills months ago. A background check bill and a red flag kind of bill, right? You know, and then he won't even give it the time of day, he might now. The other thing we did that's been very, very undercovered so far is last Congress finally allowed the CDC to study the issue. Allowed, right? We just allocated $50 million, the first time in a generation. We allocated the resources for them to actually do it. Okay, that's the difference. That's the difference. The 115th Congress, led by Paul Ryan, they thought they had done their job by letting the CDC study it, but the funny little comment was, well, we didn't give them any money to do it. Our Congress afforded the money so they could actually do it and demand that they do it. Where's that bill sitting? On Mitch McConnell's desk. $50 million. In the big scheme of things, considering the consequences, I'm ashamed. So the answer is, we got a lot more work to do. What I don't want is piecemeal bills to address something that has got to be comprehensive and has got to be studied. And there's not one lever we can pull. And I will tell you, I do think this is about background checks and red flag laws. I do think we've got to have a national conversation about what kind of weaponry did our founders anticipate, and what kind of weaponry are we willing to tolerate as Americans on our streets? And let me tell you, I don't talk about gun control, I talk about gun violence prevention. I don't care about the actual tactics at the end of the day, I care about the solution. And in the 1930s, we banned gangster-style weapons. Constitutionally banned gangster-style weapons because there was mass carnage happening in our streets at the hands of gangsters. What's even more difficult now is it's at the hand of random individuals who you can't even predict sometimes. But it's the same carnage, and it's innocent people. So it's from the 1930s. Were we a better country in the 1930s? I don't know. I think we're better now, so let's get to it. And that's why I think we got to have the conversation. I invite gun owners to it. I'm a gun owner. I want to hear from people who revere the Second Amendment. I want to hear from people who own AR-15s, who have kids in school that they have to worry about. Let's not ignore those people. We got to invite them to the conversation. But until we study it, until we look at it comprehensively, until we are willing to have the courage to acknowledge some truths that we probably didn't consider before, we're not going to get anything done. And at the very end of the day, if we collectively don't start investing in kids' emotional health at younger ages in schools like this, we have a violence problem in this country. Comprehensive violence problem in this country. Yes, sometimes it's with guns, and sometimes it's suicides. Tens of thousands of people take their lives by suicide every year. We've got a crisis of a magnitude that is hard to describe. And we have the resources to address it. We just got to have the courage to have the conversation and get to it. And once again, November of 2020 is your next opportunity to affect meaningful change. We did it in 18, we took a step, we got to take a much bigger step in 2020, and we have got to, even if the Senate remains in Republican hands, we have got to inspire Mitch McConnell or his successor to follow the process that our founders demanded and expected of us, to at least force senators to take a side and finally be accountable to American people. That's what I think. Okay, in the back.
Paul Rebels.
Hey, Paul.
And I was at the last town hall too. And I asked you about impeachment then. You told me you were going to wait for Mitch McConnell to do some bipartisan election protections. You told me that's what you were waiting on. I want to know when this is going to happen. We got a lawless president that's just doing whatever he wants every day of the week, and everybody just standing around watching him. It's got to come to an end. You guys got to do your job. I don't care what Mitch McConnell's going to do. He's on his own. You guys need to do your job and hold this clown accountable.
Let me ask you, Paul. Let me ask you a question. Hold on. I'm one of 435 members of Congress, and believe me, I'm all ears. Okay. I know what the Constitution allows, and I know what it doesn't allow. Okay. What specifically what would we do that would absolutely take care of what you were concerned?
I think you need to file articles of impeachment.
And what would that do? Right now, if you file articles of impeachment, what would that do?
I think it's going to make it easier for you guys to get the documents you're looking for.
If, by the way, let me tell you something. If we can't get the documents we're looking for, that changes my calculus instantly. Okay?
Well, and
let me just finish. I want everybody to know this. Okay? This is how Jerry Nadler feels too. We are getting document production. We have 3 new witnesses coming. The Financial Services Committee is working on his tax returns for Deutsche Bank. I've never seen anybody work so hard to protect something from being released in my entire life as this president is protecting those tax returns. I think it should be incumbent on anybody running for president, not to mention serving as president, to police those. So that stuff's coming. If they refuse, that's a totally different ballgame. But we are getting exactly what we're been asking for.
Well, I just feel like the goalposts keep getting moved every week. It's every time something happens, you gotta say, well, we gotta wait for this document. We gotta wait for this document. Robert Mueller gave you everything you needed.
He didn't give what we needed, because I'll tell you this, I read it, of course, there's a lot of it. I can point to 10 different things that anybody with a reasonable mind could say, you know, you can start that right now. But I'll tell you, there's a big difference. Impeachable is one thing, convictable is another, and completing an investigation, because I think there's a lot more. The nation needs to be aware of everything, and it's got to be accountable, and it's got to be transparent, and there's a lot more to come, is what I believe, and we've got to complete that. That's all. It's a plain and simple process. If we did it before doing so, I think that is irresponsible. And furthermore, we have a Senate that has made it so clear that it is a fault, which is, by the way, the most shameful. That is just as shameful as President Trump's actions himself, I would argue. And I can't do anything about that. You know who can do it? We can. So when you say you do your job, that's why I love all of you in this room. You took the time to come out and actually participate in politics. Let's inspire the rest of the country to get up on Saturday mornings and do something about it too, because we're not going to do it alone. I can't do it alone. Our Congress right now, even in Democratic hands, can't do it alone because the Constitution doesn't afford it. So I need all of you, and I agree with you on that.
Well, thank you for that. The point I was just making is the House needs to do their job. The head with Mitch McConnell, let him do what he's going to do anyway. We already know what he's going to do.
Well, give us like I said, I'm focused on process. I respect you and your opinion. I believe the judiciary is going to have a lot more to say in the coming weeks. Let's see what comes out, and I rest assured I will make a principled decision based on what I see at the completion of their investigation, because doing so before that's complete, again, I think is very dangerous for future Congresses, and I hear you. I feel the same way as you do about what should be. Believe me, I understand. I really, really do. But I'm inviting all of you to be part of the solution too, which is getting people out to vote. We lost that last election by tens of thousands of votes when you get right down to it. And everyone in this room can take a step that will be as meaningful as anything this country's ever known if we can change things in 2020. That's how we got to do it together.
Hello, Dean.
Hello.
I'm John Perrin from Eden Prairie, and I'm very happy voted for you. My question is, where are the Republicans? You talked about there being, do any of them have a conscience? Do any of them have any, the people you know in your sphere at the Capitol, do the Republicans say the same things we're hearing today from you or from our audience? Do they see the way this president is corrupting and all? I can go on, I don't need to. Where are the Republicans?
Yes, in my experience, Republicans have a conscience, just like Democrats have a conscience. What we don't have is a system that allows people to make decisions based on principle. When I say allows, I shouldn't say allows, but a system that rewards and promotes making decisions based on principle versus serving party. We have a system that's focused on self-preservation. And if you want to know the root of this whole problem, the whole problem is predicated on self-preservation. From the president, the Senate, to the Congress itself, to the House itself. And in private conversations, I will tell you, John, almost without exception, in my private conversations with my Republican colleagues, they are just as disgusted and appalled by his behavior as all of you. I promise you that. The question, now that's a disconnect between that and trying to remove him from office, because they all recognize if they try to remove him from office right now, without the election doing so, that they will lose their next election and be primary. That's how this sickening system works. You're standing right next to a Republican tracker whose job it is with a camera to follow me all around, to catch me saying something or doing something that will be manipulated and used on an ad against me. or to inspire a primary, right? That's how the system works. It goes on both sides. It's systematic. It's disgusting. It's reprehensible. It's why most people would never consider running for Congress, because they don't want you to. That's how the system works. That's the problem. And to all of you who want to demean, diminish, and be disrespectful to Republicans, that's just as big as part of the problem. Let's be invitational. You know, let's change the system. Let's change the system so that thoughtful Republicans and thoughtful Democrats want to run for office, whether it be city council, mayor, state senate, state house, Congress. That's the real problem. And we should also impose term limits so that people can make courageous decisions and do it. So when we talk about this, yes, I wish there was more courage in Congress. My goodness. But I'm telling you now, I've been there 8 months. I understand why this, this allegiance to your coach and your team instead of to your country. It's sickening, but I understand why it's happening. It starts with the money. It starts with self-preservation. It starts with the extraordinary power of vested interests that threaten members of Congress, literally, if they don't act accordingly. And shame on all of us for allowing this to continue. That's why I ran for Congress. I want to be part of the solution. It's not going to happen easily, but we're not going to do it by demeaning the other side. And I will tell you in private conversations, I think there are a lot of people willing to start being courageous, but we've got to start changing the system to reward that kind of behavior. And right now we have a system designed to do just the opposite, which is why so many of us are so darn frustrated. So I hear you. And I can only tell you one thing, that if we can change the money in politics, if we can create a system, create an electoral system that has more competitive districts, so people like me, who don't succeed by just pandering to a base, who succeed only by listening to everybody he or she represents, that would be in the country's best interest. If we had a system that rewarded the investment of time in Congress to study issues, get to know your fellow members, understand procedure, and make a difference, but then after maybe 10 or 12 years, perhaps time to move on and let someone else give it a try, that would be helpful, because we saw all the evidence we ever needed in the last Congress. The only courageous members of the Republican conference, particularly in the Senate, were 3 people who knew they would not be returning. Those are the only 3 people. And that's just human nature. We're all human beings. So that's what I ask you to be mindful of, and we can make a difference. And I will tell you, I've had conversations with Mark Meadows and Ted Cruz about term limits, if you can imagine that. It's possible. And I'm going to work my tail off to find whatever tiny intersections that might exist right now that we can actually work towards, because sometimes it is those small changes that are going to make huge differences in the future. And that's when we're going to make change. So I hear you, and I'm working on it. Where are we going? Right here.
Hi, Dean. I'm Miriam.
Hi, Miriam.
So I'm very worried about what is our policy for China. If we look at what they're doing in Hong Kong, Tibet, and most importantly in East Turkestan. We all read our history books. That East Turkestan, which they changed the name to Xinjiang province, was the actual Silk Road. And they are committing this horrendous atrocity of putting millions of local Uyghurs, the land belongs to them, in concentration camps, injecting women to make them sterile. From 1978, for over 40 years, they had one-child policy. So they have killed over 450 million girls to have baby boy as an only child. Now they're forcing Uyghur women to marry non-Chinese. This is, the Silk Road is the gateway to Russia, Central Asia here, India, Pakistan. How can we allow this to happen in this day and age?
Thank you, Miriam, for your question. You asked what our policy is towards China. This is a metaphor for everything that's wrong with this administration. We don't have one. We have someone sitting in the White House who makes knee-jerk reactions based on what he sees on a newscast. Not a policy, not a well-conceived notion of a strategy, no intention to work with colleagues and allies from around the world. So you ask what our policy is. I wish that's how I started my remarks tonight. We need leadership in this country, both in the White House, in the Senate, and in the House. that articulates the strategy after thoughtful debate and expresses a mission and encourages people to invest in that. And right now, I don't know what our policy is towards China because it changes every day. We have three things we can talk about vis-a-vis China and probably everywhere in the world, including our own country. Human rights abuses. Yes, massive in China, and I hear you and I empathize, and it's atrocious, and they're occurring in countries all around the world, and human rights abuses are occurring in our own country, and I think we should be mindful of that right now too, and it should start here. Second issue relative to China, since you brought it up in kind of that, in the general sense, fentanyl. I just talked to the sheriff who's in this room right now about there's another fentanyl death here in this community just recently. A lot of that coming from fake pharmaceuticals coming from China. We need a policy relative to that. And then third is trade and protection of IP rights and protection of business, who's doing business in China. We've been abused for years. And again, this is a failing of administrations on both sides of the aisle, let's just be honest. I do respect the administration for at least identifying it and trying to do something about it. I just think the strategy is woefully ineffective, unclear, and is going to be probably more damaging. So the answer to the question, I think, on the subject you bring up about human rights abuses, and this is more generally across the country, there was a time in this country, not long ago, where we recognized that our power was much more substantial when we collaborated with like-minded countries around the world. When we talk about fiscal responsibility, why should it only be the United States of America that invests its resources in trying to be the world's policeman? It should be just the opposite in this era. We should be working collaboratively, specifically as it relates to China. We should ultimately have a thoughtful competition with China, not an adversarial relationship. If America and China work together the way I think Republicans and Democrats could, imagine the outcome in this world. And I think it's achievable, but it starts at the top. And we have a leader who does not acknowledge truths, who disseminates falsehoods, and in my estimation, lacks human empathy, which is where human rights abuses don't seem to matter a whole lot to him, and they do to us. So I think, again, I'm going to go back to 2020. We've got to change the occupant of the White House. I think if we work hard, we surely can, and we have to ensure that whoever occupies the White House recognizes that a lot of the abuses that we're trying to police around the world, and a lot of the issues and policy areas, start at home as well. And I have empathy for that subject, and I think we should be mindful of these abuses happening all around the world, and it's oftentimes the quietest voices in the most faraway places that don't have access to any of us that need us the most. And it starts with leadership, and I'm appalled and I'm disappointed, but I think change is coming.
Hi, Dean. Ann Huspel here. Ann from Minnetonka. Dean, I support you. I voted for you. I will vote for you. I've campaigned for you. I have done door knocking for you. I support you. I appreciate you being in Congress, and I follow the legislation you have worked on, your carbon fee, your co-sponsoring with the drug pricing and those things, and I'm aware of your stance, that you are working on issues while the question of impeachment is going on, and I appreciate that. And
I hear a butt coming.
But with great respect. So I do want to bring up my stance on impeachment too, and just be a part of the audience here that is coming up and saying, I support impeachment. I do have a question related to that. I appreciated the comments you've said so far, and they really informed me about what path you are following. You've educated me more on your strong belief that the Judiciary Committee is gathering apparently more information than is in the Mueller report. I have two questions, and one is kind of a comment, maybe you can comment on, but what distinguishes you from the representatives that so far have not come out, that have come out saying, I support impeachment? I wish that you would be a bit more vocal or open about, in Congress, your views on potentially impeachment or Trump's behavior. And that's kind of a comment that maybe you can address. But my specific question is related to these red line impeachable issues. Here's one. Trump has diverted Congress allocated funds for the military to the border wall. That's been in the news lately. And I don't understand all the workings of allocation and treasury, and who can spend that money and whatnot. I've been reading that, we know the power of the purse in Article 1, Section X, the appropriation clause. I understand, but how can it be then spent? And my question about that is twofold. What is the House doing about this latest issue where Trump is saying, I will take those funds from the military and divert them to the border wall? Is there a legal basis for that? And if not, what is the House doing to get that money back? Or conversely, do you understand if there is a legal basis for Trump being able to divert those funds?
So the answer to the question is, I believe not. The Constitution is very clear that it vests the power of the purse in the United States Congress, and this seems to me to be a very clear violation of that. We have not distinctly allocated resources to this. He's diverting them, and that appears to be in conflict with certainly our intent, both the spirit and the letter, and the Constitution itself. So then the question becomes, well, what is the House doing about it? I told you early in this town hall that I'm recognizing the constitutional limitations of the checks and balances and accountability and oversight. I believe we're doing as much as we can, considering the fact that we've got a White House in President Trump's hands and a Senate in Mitch McConnell's hands. These are unbelievably unusual times right now. And I say thank goodness. Let's not applaud ourselves, but at least we did flip the House of Representatives. If we didn't, my friends, can you imagine right now? And I'm not trying to deflect this conversation, just the opposite, but at least we are doing the oversight investigations. At least we are raising these issues. I don't know what the outcome is, but rest assured, when we return on Monday, and we've already had a conference call on this subject, this is a crisis. It could be a crisis, because ultimately you entrust the executive branch to ultimately enact the laws passed by the legislative branch. And if they are unwilling to do so, you rely on the judiciary to apply, to actually enforce it. But now we're even walking an unusual line in that respect, as you surely know. So how we proceed is back to process. This is all process. Mitt Romney, I was pleased to see, issued a very, very strongly worded press release relative to this issue the other day. I am hopeful that if we can focus on process comprehensively, we can start reining back some of these abuses. And Mitt Romney's message was, Congress has afforded the executive branch over the last number of years a lot more than the Constitution had intended, and it's time to reassert ourselves. So when I hear him saying that, I'm actually hopeful. But again, the majority leader in the United States Senate is probably one of the most challenging people we face right now relative to all these questions. Because we have a system designed not to let the House of Representatives do anything it wants. The U.S. Congress collectively does. And it requires that we work with the Senate. So that's where we stand. This just happened last week. Rest assured, there are a lot of members on both sides of the aisle who got phone calls from the White House advising them that significant projects and investments in their own districts are going to be halted in favor of investing in the wall. And it is a comprehensive violation, I think, of the Constitution. We will learn more next week. This is just, and to your point of, what are we doing? I found myself in the early days of my term constantly tweeting after the president tweeted. And I don't think it's in the best interest of every member of Congress to wait for the president's ridiculous morning tweets and simply get caught up in the cycle of responding. If anything, I honor those very, very handful of people who've gotten off Twitter altogether. Just said, I'm overwhelmed by this. We're not going to fix things by tweeting. We're going to fix things by talking, and frankly, it is screens comprehensively are a big part of the problem right now, whether they be television or Twitter. And I say that because I believe in the dissemination of information, but when opinion gets in the way of fact, and people accept it as such, we've got some challenges that we've got to catch up to. So I think we got to start focusing on I'm going to keep going back to the same thing. What we got to focus on is the change that we can do collectively. I am one vote in the United States House of Representatives, 1 out of 435. I will always vote what I believe in the best interest of the people I represent here, and then collectively our country, and beyond that, the entire world. Those are my priorities. And I hope to get it right most of the time. And if you feel I don't, I will at least explain myself. But rest assured, exactly what you're thinking and what you just said is on my mind every morning. I contemplate, how can I do something about it? Tweeting, though, should not be celebrated and consider doing something about it. It's, I would say, just the opposite. You'll see a lot of show horses on the nightly news and in Twitter, people with millions of followers, tweeting all the day long about all these abuses of the president. But it's the ones whose names you don't know, and the ones you don't see on the nightly news, and the ones that don't have big Twitter followers, that I will tell you right now from experience on the inside, they're the ones that are doing the hard work of accountability, oversight, and transparency. I'd rather be part of that group. And by the way, the only thing we will ever get anything done is to do so with people on the other side of the aisle. That is true if you're a Democrat, it's true if you're a Republican. That is how this system was designed. Whether you like it or not, that's how it's designed. And I represent a district that had not elected a Democrat since 1958. So if anyone's mindful of that, it's me. And that's why I want to represent everybody. And you can imagine, I spend time in rooms like this. I spend times in rooms in Bloomington and Edina, Minnetonka, Plymouth, and I spend a lot of time in Coon Rapids. I'm going to Osseo after this. I'm in Corcoran and Greenfield and Rogers. And not everybody sees it the same way. That doesn't make them bad people. It doesn't make them misinformed people. It just means people have different life experiences and different lenses. And I want to be mindful and respectful to all. So that is how I'm going to conduct myself. Sometimes I might be disappointing. Sometimes you maybe want a little more gusto and a little more fire and brimstone from me. I think we need a little bit less of that right now, and that's my intention.
Hi, Dean. My name is Rosanna Garibaldi. I'm from Osseo.
Rosanna.
We pay
Osseo?
over Osseo, Minnesota.
Oh, you can give me a ride there after this.
I already prayed with you.
Yay!
We paid over $19,000 for our health care last year. This was over 1/4 of our income. When it comes to our dysfunctional healthcare system, we are all frauds in the proverbial pot of water on the burner. This has come on slowly over the last 30 to 40 years, and we have just allowed this abysmal system to evolve into the mess that it is. Profiteering is rampant among the insurance, pharma, and large hospital and healthcare organizations. The Medicare for All Act of 2019, H.R. 1384, is the only plan at the national level that will provide comprehensive benefits to all residents of the United States at a price through a payroll tax that all can afford. Benefits will include all medically necessary inpatient and outpatient expenses, as well as drugs, vision, hearing, dental, and long-term care. There will be no network premiums, deductibles, co-pays, co-insurance, donut holes, surprise bills, supplemental insurance, Advantage plan, or any of the other BS profit-making gimmicks that have been baked into this ridiculous system. We, not an insurance company, will decide which doctors, hospitals, and clinics to go to. It's time for all of us to demand that our members of Congress face the reality that the only way to solve this dysfunction and contain costs is to get everyone into one risk pool and have a single payer with the leverage to negotiate prices with all the players so everyone makes a decent living, but no one is allowed to game the system. That is what H.R. 1384 will do. What features that I have mentioned make this such a flawed system that you dismiss it? From what we heard at your last town hall, you have not read H.R. 1384, so how can you make an informed decision to oppose it? We have people in this room today who have lost their health and their financial well-being just so insurance companies, big pharma, and providers can continue to make a big profit. We elected you to Congress to support policies that will improve the lives of people. According to the National Nurses United, the Minnesota Nurses Association, and over 200 economists, the Medicare for All Act of 2019 is just such a policy.
Did you say 19? I want to remember what you said in the beginning of your remarks. You spent $19,000 on health care. Yeah. Very clearly, it's time that we make a moral decision in this country, and I say that very intentionally, a moral decision to ensure that every single American has access to high-quality care at a price that they can afford, and that nobody is one illness away from bankruptcy. That's my position. So the question is, how do we get there? And by the way, I don't think that finds a whole lot of opposition, which is my whole objective in Congress, is to identify the outcomes that we want, rather than arguing the tactics. And I respect all of you who are advocating for different policies and specifically different bills. And I have great empathy for those of you in this room and families and beyond this room who have been bankrupt or taken advantage of by a system that clearly doesn't work. In fact, we don't have a healthcare system. Let's start with that. We have a sick care system, and that is the root of our problem. We have a system with incentives to perform procedures rather than with incentives to keep people healthy. If we had a healthcare system, it would be just the opposite. And I understand it's woefully broken. And we've made progress over the last number of years. The question is, how do we get to where we want to go? No matter what you all want, I think we can agree on one thing. Care for everybody at a price they can afford that's high quality. So my intention is to find common ground. And I believe the way to get there expeditiously, because I talk to people every single week who are facing existential issues to their lives or their loved ones' lives, and economic issues that would break most people. And I need to do something to act fast. And what I think the best thing we can do, and why I'm an advocate of this, is we got to let Americans make the choice by offering a program that you're talking about, whether it's a Medicaid or Medicare buy-in, and there's lots of propositions and more being worked on at this very moment. I believe if we want to achieve what I want, we have got to do so in that way, which is let Americans choose what would work best for them. And this can be the bridge that gets us to where all of you want to go. But we have to let Americans make that choice, is what I believe, and I think it can be done. And I think it can be done in a way that makes it affordable. I think it can be done in a way where Medicare or Medicaid then would, in turn, change the entire reimbursement system so it rewards health, not just procedures. And I think it can be done in a way where Medicare or Medicaid, not just like the CDC can study gun violence, but must study, in this case, must negotiate pharmaceutical pricing. Because we in America spend twice as much as any developed nation on healthcare. Our outcomes are mid-pack, and we subsidize, and I will use that word very intentionally, we subsidize the entire world. And as far as I know, healthcare and pharmaceuticals, that category, is the only category of products or services in which Americans spend exponentially more than any country in the world. And Republicans and Democrats can surely agree on the fact that something is wrong if that's the case. So we got to work our way backwards. So I just say to all of you that the bridge to be built, I think, is that. And then let Americans choose. And if you work for a company that has a company employee plan, if you like it, you should be allowed to stay on it, is what I think in the near term. If you don't, then there's a public option, just like we have public schools. And you can send your kids to private schools if you wish. This is a land of freedom and liberty. And as I talk to my Republican friends and try to understand, what is it that prevents this conversation from even happening? Oftentimes they'll say, well, because I believe in competition and I believe in freedom to make choices. So that's when I say, well, I've got a darn good solution for you. Let's increase the competition by having a public plan that you can buy into if you want. And then, B, you'll have the freedom to make that choice. And they think for a moment, well, that doesn't sound like such a bad idea, but I know my leadership isn't so fond of that. That's where we stand right now. I think that can be overcome. So I'm just saying to you that the outcome I want is the same as all of you. And the solutions, I think, are not just to hammer a bill that might be sitting in the House right now. The solution is to talk about the outcome and work our way back and, as fast as we can, create a national health program in which people can buy. And if you work at a company and you don't want your company plan, the company then uses that money to buy into the national plan for you. And if Americans make that choice, we will have done what very few democracies in the world actually do, which is let the constituents decide which way we're going to go. And I think that's the best way forward. I think it's expeditious. I think it's possible. And I want to focus on the fact that we've got a lot of problems right now, as evidenced by the fact that you spent $19,000 on your healthcare last year. It's sickening to me. As you know, I've worked a little bit in healthcare on the government side. I see why it's broken. I understand your dismay and your disgust with the current system. And I'm going to wrap this by telling you one thing. This is all you need to know. Why does nothing change? Let's start with pharma and $240 million a year in paying lobbyists, 2 of them for each member of Congress, to come and keep the status quo. If you're willing to spend $240 million a year to keep the status quo, that says a lot. So if you all will help me elevate campaign finance reform, ethics reform, and change this whole thing, and I want to use that one vote of mine and those limited hours that we have, because we have a system designed to keep us so occupied that they don't even want us meeting and coming to solutions and taking care of the business you sent us to. That's why this system exists. My colleagues are spending 3 to 5 hours a week raising money. They're handing out checks sometimes on the House floor, they're handing out solicitation cards, they're going to 2 or 3 packed lobbyist events at night, speaking for a moment, handing a white envelope, and they're on their way. I don't take member money, I don't take PAC money, and I don't take lobbyist money for a reason. There's only one person doing that. It's me. I'm the only one that can absolutely 100% say that it wasn't one of these vested interests checks that made a difference in how I conduct myself. We need more people like that can make courageous decisions, but most importantly, focus on what I want to, which is the process. And that's not maybe going to fix it tomorrow, but we've got to take some steps in that direction. And I think we can, and I think that's the way to do it. I ask you to start looking into some of these propositions in addition to the bill you just referenced. And by the way, there are thousands of bills. You're right, I can't read every single bill. I wish I could. I wish they afforded time so we could read every single bill, but there are thousands. The fact of the matter is, I look at every bill that has substance very carefully, and I entrust my staff to give me an executive summary of them, and ones that I find very compelling, I do absolutely read. And I ask all of you, when you have time, if you have some free time, look at Medicare Extra, look at Medicare X. Those are 2 examples, and I know you shake your head, but these are things that actually might get done. And if they become a bridge to getting somewhere else that lets Americans choose, I think it's the right way to go. And I ask you to investigate it.
And do the cost containment. None of those Medicare quantities do the cost containment. And you must know that.
I patently disagree that cost containment is independent. By the way, I don't see how the proposition you just referred to does the cost containment that we need either. And that's part of the problem. What's that? I'm going to make this really clear, everybody. We spend twice as much as any nation. No bill I ever read yet, and that's why I've not been significantly in favor of any bill, because they're not there yet. We're working on some right now that I hope at some point we can. I've not read one bill that has been presented in the last number of Congresses that I think is the answer to our healthcare crisis. I don't think there's one out there that is correct. And I don't disagree with those of you who feel differently, but I believe everybody in this room might have something different take on it. Okay?
The damn bill!
What? Read the damn bill. Look, everybody, I'm telling you that I have read every bill that has been proposed. I don't think a bill that is the solution to everything that we want exists right now. And secondly, I don't think any bill that has been proposed right now has a chance of even passing the House, not to mention the Senate being signed into law. So what I'm focused on is trying to find ways to help people who are suffering right now. And the way I can do that right now is to help fix the ACA and look at reinsurance and build some stopgaps so people aren't going to go bankrupt from their government health insurance problems. And then secondly, let Americans make the choice, because we are not going to get anywhere. We are going to spend decades having the same argument, is all I'm telling all of you. I respect all of you.
Get the insurance companies out, that's the problem.
I respect you, okay? I respect you, but I have a job. I have a job which is to assess everything and do what I think is in the best interest of the nation, and I do not see a bill that does that yet. And I'm telling you, what you're arguing for is totally reasonable. I'm just telling you that the bill that can actually do something about it does not yet exist. And there is a way to do it, and I'm working on the way to do it. Okay, I respect you. Okay, I respect you. What? Okay, then it's just a differing opinion. I respect that too. That's what this is about. Okay, that's what this is about. I respect your opinions. I'm telling you my opinion. I have read through every single proposition relative to healthcare solutions that exist in the 115th Congress and the 116th Congress. And I do not believe one of those is achievable, and I don't think any of those solve the problems that the nation needs to solve. And I think the solution is a hybrid approach, which is oftentimes what the solution is. That's what happens. And that's how most members of Congress feel. The problem is, we need other voices at the table, and right now the only voices being heard are the insurance companies, and are the medical companies, and are the people that have vested interests in the conversation. That's why your voices are important, and I respect them, and I'm telling you how I feel. That's 11 o'clock. Okay, unfortunately, I've got a commitment in Osseo that I have to go to. But my staff is going to stick around, and I ask you to visit with them. If you have bills to share, thoughts to share, more criticisms, by all means. But most importantly, I want to return to what I said in the beginning. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for taking the time to express yourselves. Thank you for being if you disagree with me, for doing so in a thoughtful manner. I think we need to do more of that. Thank you for sharing your ideas with me. Thank you for being here. And most importantly, optimism is just as contagious as fear. And that is something that we can't do in Congress. We can't legislate compassion, we can't legislate decency, we can't legislate respect. But you can. And I ask in small ways and big ways, to the extent that you can, beginning when you leave this room and this parking lot today, to take one step in some small way to speak with people who disagree with you, who have different lives than you, who live in different places than you, who may pray, look, and eat differently than you. Because if the 3rd District in Minnesota can't be the district that shows the rest of the country the way, then we are in trouble. But I have faith in all of you, and I'm so grateful to represent you, and I'm honored, and I say Godspeed to all. Thank you.